Assalamu alaikum students. I'm Humaira Khurshid with your lecture for Introduction to Linguistics. As far as today's lecture is concerned, it is about the non-verbal communication. Whenever we talk about communication or whenever we talk about some conversation, the immediate idea or the sense that comes to our mind is that the conversation is made up of words. It is made up of sentences. It is made up of paragraphs. It is made up of chunks of spoken language. And everything is constituted or formed by words. As a matter of fact, a lot of things are communicated not by words but by non-verbal communication. What is this non-verbal communication? As a matter of fact, non-verbal communication is the use of body language in order to communicate what is left unsaid or what need to be emphasized in the communication. So we can say that interpersonal communication is much more than the explicit meaning of words and the information or message that they convey. It also includes implicit messages, whether intentional or not, which are expressed through non-verbal behavior. Non-verbal communication includes facial expressions, the tone and the pitch of voice, gestures displayed through body language, kinesics, and the physical distance between the communicators, proxemics. What now? Let's have a look. What does that? What role does all that non-verbal communication or the physical gestures play in communication? Why do we feel need to communicate non-verbally when the verbal mode is available, either in written or in spoken form? The first role that is played by non-verbal communication is that it reinforces or modifies or changes what is said in the words. So whatever is communicated by means of words is further emphasized or negated by non-verbal communication. Let's take an example. Uh, mm, People nod their heads vigorously when they want to say yes, or whenever they want to emphasize that they are fully agree to something what is said or what has been said. And when they want to communicate a sense of disagreement, they shrug their shoulders with a sad or neutral impression. When somebody asks you, "Are you fine?" or "Are you okay?" and you respond, "I'm fine, thanks," and at the same time you shrug your shoulders and uh, with along with shrugging your shoulders, your expression and tone is detached or reserved. It indicates something else, that the matter is something different than just being physically okay. There is something that is not all right, and that "I'm fine, thanks" actually conveys things are not really fine at all. If they are physically fine, at least they are not fine at the level of interaction or at the level of behavior between the two persons involved in the communication. So we can say that nonverbal communication plays the role of emphasizing factor or diminuting factor of some communication. Another role that is played by nonverbal communication is that it conveys information about the emotional state of the persons who are involved in the communication. Yes, we know a lot from the non-verbal gestures than from the words about the emotional state of a person. Yes, for example, when we use a simple Urdu phrase कि फ़लाँ बंदे का रंग ही बदल गया, तो वो जो रंग बदलना है, दैट वाज having more worth than the actual words that person was saying. That change in the color of the face is more indicative of the real meaning than the word that somebody is using. So we can say that change in the temper is indicative of the or playing its role in the communication. Your facial expressions, your tone of voice, and your body language can often tell people exactly how you feel, even if you have hardly said a word. Consider how often you have said to someone, "Are you okay? You look a bit down." We know how people feel from their non-verbal communication. Yes, when you are exhausted and somebody asks you how you are, what would be your response? Even if you are okay, the tone of your voice would be indicating your exhaustive temper. Similarly, when you are anger, even if you are saying yes, I'm fully all right, still the tone or the pitch of the language conveys that you don't want to communicate the state of being all right. Actually, it is something else than being all right. Thirdly, nonverbal communication defines or reinforces the relationship between the people. Yes, whenever we want to develop some intimate relationship, we have to utilize this nonverbal communication. Take the example of a mother and a child. Most of the time, the mother has to pat the back of the child in order to encourage him or her. She has to kiss the child, or she has to embrace the child in order, or give a big hug to the child in order to communicate the sense of closeness or the sense of close affiliation. This non-verbal communication is actually playing far more emphasizing or reinforcing factor as compared to the words communicated by somebody or even in by the mother in this example. Have you ever watched two persons sitting talking? You may have noticed that they tend to mirror each other's body language. Yes, when somebody asks you in anger a question, definitely you reply in similar angry tone. But when somebody asks you something politely, your answer would be quite polite manner. They hold their hands in similar positions, they smile at the same time, and they turn to face each other more fully. These movements reinforce their relationship. They build on their rapport and help them to feel more connected. Yes, so we can say that non-verbal communication provide the basis for intimate relations. Yes, another role that is played by non-verbal communication is to regulate the flow of communication. Yes, where to stop and from where to the next person is going to take the turn. Everything is communicated by non-verbal gestures. Take the routine example of the classroom. The teacher looking at the students and pointing just his or her hand towards one student. The non-verbal communication is indicating that it's this student's turn to speak now, and the student indicating their intention to participate in classroom discourse just by raising their hands. Again, non-verbal communication. There are a number of signals that we use to tell people that we have finished speaking or that we wish to speak. An emphatic nod by our head side and firm closing of the lips indicates that we have nothing more to say. Making eye contact with the chair of the meeting and nodding slightly will indicate that you want to speak. Yes, another factor that I'm going to mention here is that most of the time it is assumed that nonverbal communication is just a part of the spoken language. But If we have a closer analysis of the written form of language, we would find the instances of non-verbal communication even in the written language. For example, your choice of vocabulary is quite indicative of your education level, even the subject or discipline to which you belong. In the similar way, if you are going to write down something, your handwriting is indicative certain aspects of your personality, your education, your maturity, your personal expression, your creative use of the word. Similarly, if you are going to even compose something on your laptop, the choice of the font, you are going to use calibri font, you are going to use new roman, you are going to reference your things, by which means it is indicative of different aspects of your personality. How capable are you going to handle different digital sources, again indicative of your capacity or your level of being educated to use those digital means. So we can say even the written mode of writing is indicative of your non-verbal positioning. And so we can say that the written form is having its non-verbal signals as well. Even the choice of the language, for example, we're going when we are going to write something, either we are going for the English, British English, or American English, the choice of the spelling would be indicative. Our racial inclination, our linguistic orientation, or are brought up in which are brought up in certain linguistic community. Over the years, many people have argued that written words also contain non-verbal communication. Your handwriting can give clues about how you were feeling when you wrote a note. For example, nowadays your choice of font and color also say something about you. However, it is now generally agreed that these forms of non-verbal communication are pretty unreliable indicators of character. They convey far less information than the non-verbal communication that is part of face-to-face interactions. Yes, another factor that is relevant to the non-verbal communication is that we become mature in non-verbal communication, in the use of non-verbal communication, as well in the understanding of non-verbal communication as more we grow in some culture. Or we can say that non-verbal communication is culture specific. Non-verbal communication can be very culture specific. Most of us learn to interpret non-verbal communication as we grow up and develop in certain culture. It is normal part of how we communicate with other people, and most of us both use it and interpret it quite unconsciously. Yes, now let's have a look at examples of culture specific nonverbal communication. The thumb up gesture that is shown here in the slide, which generally signals approval in English speaking countries, is considered offensive in other countries, including Greece, Italy, and some parts of the Middle East. Similarly, making a circle with your thumb and forefinger like this picture means okay in Western cultures. It is used in particular by divers in this way. But in Japan, however, it is reputedly the sign for money, and in Arabic countries, it is a sign for threat. So we can say that non-verbal communication is highly culture oriented. Let's have a look at different types of non-verbal communications. First would be included body movements or kinesics. For example, hand gestures or nodding or shaking the head. We are often using these means easily as the element of non-verbal communication to control the communication. Second type of non-verbal communication is the posture, or how you stand or sit, whether your arms are crossed or closed or not. Yes, the posture is highly indicative of the personality. Either somebody is feeling confident or not. Either somebody is fresh and active, or somebody is exhausted. Either somebody is willing to do some task diligently or not. The posture of the person would be indicating all these behaviors. Eye contact, where the amount of eye contact often determines the level of trust and trustworthiness. Again, it is indicative of the confidence level. Paralanguage features, yes, it is again another form of non-verbal communication. These are the aspects or the voice part of the speech. For example, the pitch of the while we are talking, the tone in which we are talking, and the speed of the speech when we are saying something. Yes, and the next kind of nonverbal communication is closeness or personal space, proxemics, which means the level of intimacy and which varies very much by culture. For example, in Italy, it's a norm to meet the people with a big hug and handshake. Similarly, it's here in Indian Punjab, the people prefer to meet and embrace each other when they meet. So, the sense of closeness is culture oriented, and it's again communicative. The enthusiasm or the intimate behavior of the people who are meeting, and this intimacy is again, or this non-verbal gesture of intimacy is again a source of non-verbal communication of the relationship between the persons who are involved in certain speech act. Yes, the other kind or type of non-verbal communication is the facial expressions. It includes smile, frowning, and blinking, which are very hard to control consciously. Interestingly, the broad facial expressions that show strong emotions such as fear, anger, and happiness are the same throughout the world. Whichever language we will speak, either we live here in Pakistan or in some European countries or in America, the expression of fear, anger, and happiness would be almost seen on the face, and it would be glowing on the face, or it would be less glowing on the face, or we can say saddening effect on the face, and all the gesture would be same, or facial expressions would be same throughout the world. Next kind of non-verbal communication is the physiological changes. Yes, for example, you may sweat or blink more when you are nervous, and similarly, your heartbeat is likely to increase. These are almost impossible to control consciously and are therefore very important indicators of mental state. Yes, students, now your activity for today's lecture, you have to prepare the assignment as usual. And secondly, it's the practical task that you have to observe the nonverbal communication of somebody from your family for one day, and then you have to analyze the nonverbal communication on the lines that is discussed in the lecture. For example, there are given 5 or 6 different types of nonverbal communication types, and you have to align the nonverbal communication that you have observed along with those categories or types. Which features or which types of nonverbal communication have you observed, and in which category would they fall? And then you can interpret according to the initial material, rather about the initial material, sorry, that have been given to you by the initial part of the lecture, mm, uh, by indicating what role has been played by that non-verbal communication by the member of your family, either that was reinforcing, that was negating, that was communication enhancing, or it was something else? Okay, students, it's over for this lecture.